A little bit of background about the talk. BFRL, Building Fire Research, has been developing fire models since the 1970s. And early on, a fire model was nothing more than a formula or an equation in a handbook that you could just take a calculator, work out some estimate of a temperature in a compartment where you have a fire. Moving into the 1980s, these models could no longer be written down with just one simple equation and solved by hand. They required a computer, and at the time, of course, computers weren't all that fast. Into the 1990s, we started to get a little bit more sophisticated in the way that we developed software, and the software was distributed to the public. We dug up, thanks to Rick Peacock, a copy of one of the models, Hazard 1, which was released in 1991. And in those days, any kind of software, especially scientific software, usually came in a box, and there was a manual, and there were a couple of floppy disks. Sometime later, people discovered the web as a way to distribute the software. So some of our earliest models were posted in bulletin boards with very, very slow download rates. I think you quoted, what was the download speed?
Well, it was fast when it was 300 bits a second. 300
bits a second. You would, dial in and you would download this model onto your, whatever your computer was in those days. And of course, then the internet came along and things have gotten a lot easier. But even so, we still haven't really realized the full power that the internet brings to us. And over the last couple of years, Brian has introduced us to a number of services, if you will, which I'll talk about today, that have made our software development increase in efficiency by literally an order of magnitude. Because these services are what people are now calling social media tools. The term has been brought up even here at NIST, where in December, NIST had a social media day to introduce the staff to a lot of internet tools that some of you in the room have been familiar with for years, and some of you in the room have never heard of before. I think a lot of this focusing on social media tools has come about because it didn't go unnoticed that President Obama used things like Facebook and YouTube to win the election. Now, of course, that wasn't the only reason why he won the election, but he clearly tapped into the power of the internet, especially amongst the young people, got his word out in ways that typically presidential candidates don't get the word out. Usually TV commercials are the way people communicated in the past. Now we're communicating with a whole variety of internet tools. So with that as the background, I'll turn it over to Brian. And feel free during the talk to ask questions. He'll drop words and expressions, that sort of thing that you may not have heard of. So just raise your hand or shout out if you don't understand one of these words.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Did everybody get the 3D glasses from the back of the... No, I'm just kidding.
Rick, can you turn that back on?
All right, so Kevin gave a great background and introduction to what I'm going to be talking about, and sort of the needs, how these things have changed over time, and how our communities have changed, our user communities have changed, and the development communities have changed, and how we've made modifications in our processes here at NIST to address those things. And what I'd like to do is just start out with sort of our entry point into all these different tools and services, and that's from our homepage, our NIST.gov homepage. And it's fire.nist.gov/FDS. And from here, this is the first stop on sort of a journey through all these different information spaces, depending on your need as a user and when you come to the site. And we're looking right now to do some revisions to this to try to get people even closer to the information that they need faster and less time spent trying to process a bunch of non-relevant information to them. And the other day in the Atlantic, there was this article called with the title iGov. It's on page 36 of the January-February 09 edition. And it had this sort of quote from Greg Ehlen. And I felt like this is a very key insight into how to proceed with this new information space and sharing information. That you have to start with wanting to share it, and then look to how you can make that information that you're sharing easy to get to in the format that people need it. You know? So if you don't want to share it and it's not easy to get, then there's a huge hurdle for that information adoption. So I'm going to jump into kind of the boring, more technical part first. Hopefully you won't be too bored. I'll keep it interesting with nice animations and things like that. But there really are two components, two aspects to this communication strategy that we formed. One side is, how do we maintain a software development project in a way that improves our efficiency and our capabilities? And that's sort of known as software configuration management. There are tools that help us manage the changes over time to a software project. So that's the first part of what we'll do and I'll talk about. And then the second part is, how do we then communicate these changes to people over time and get feedback from them about our project. So, and that's the social media part that I'll talk a little bit about. So I'll just go over a few kind of high-level things. The key components of a software configuration management system. First is configuration identification and control. What is that thing today exactly? And do you know what's changed since yesterday? So in our case, every change that's committed by all of the developers working in parallel is captured and tagged with a revision number. So you see a list down the left here, and each revision is given just a brief comment by that contributor, by that commenter, on what they did in that commit. And that commit, each one of these may actually cover multiple files with all different changes in them. And this interface, this system that we're using on Google Code Project Hosting, lets us dig right down to even line-by-line comparisons of what's new and what's different. So we have a very fine-grained control over what's happening in every file in our entire project space. And you can even view the files online, do differentials against what it is today and what happened last time you were in the file, see all the new changes and get yourself up to speed if you're now working in a new document or a source code file or an updated image. You can roll things back if the change was bad. You know, maybe you did something that introduced a bug. You want to roll it back a little bit. You can roll your local copy back to a previous version and then proceed forward again. So this tool gives us a really good handle on the information in our project space. And a byproduct of this is that it creates a log of changes over time. So we now have this evolving project history that we can go all the way back to when the system was first put online. What were the files in the repository? What was the state? What was the information in those? And what's really nice about this is that it helps us more easily capture and communicate the changes as we release new versions of the software. So we have this nice story that's being logged in the system that we can then capture, sort of reformat a bit, reprocess. We do it, FDS does it a little bit different than Smokeview, and but they both have a very nice format for who did what, when, and you can read between this revision, which is in this case 5.2.5 on December 10th at repository of revision number 2828, and between that and the previous revision of the last release of the software. So this is just a typical changelog. This didn't exist before, really, to this level of detail in the project before we put this system online.
In 2 years, we've gone through 3,000 revisions to the code. Roughly.
Yes, about. Well, not just to the code, but to the whole project.
To the project.
Yeah, so there could be a document somewhere that changed, or a web page, or everything in our project is captured in this system. So we know the state of all things over time. So if somebody ever comes to us and says, you know, 3 years ago, you guys released FDS 5.2.5. What was that? Can I get that file again? We don't have to, although we do keep sort of an archive of all of our releases, we could easily just go right back to the system and say, well, then check out to your computer revision 2828, and you'll have every file we had at that state in our project. So it's a very nice very nice tool for this. And here you can see on Glenn's Smokeview build, he's got the maintenance release number, what revision number or build number it was, on what date, and then he goes in and further processes it to make it more human readable. So makes like little explanatory texts that explain what that means, but without having to go dig into the actual source code or changed files, which is a very nice feature. And the other key component here is that it enables teamwork. We have 8 members of the modeling group here, plus people outside of NIST. We have external collaborators. And how do we all work together efficiently and keep evolving something forward without stepping on each other's toes or waiting for somebody else to get their job done? And the system helps with that. It also helps us work together to resolve customer problems. So if somebody has an issue, they have some kind of a bug that they found in the software, we have an issue tracking system where they can come in and report that issue, what version of the software they're using, what they've tried to do, what they expect it to do, what it isn't doing. And then once they put that in the system, we can follow up with it. We can assign it to somebody in the group to work on it. That assignment can change if the needs change. And then this person who initially put in this report can monitor via email. They'll get updates every time we make a change to the issue tracker. So we're now easily communicating to them, and they don't have to follow along and check the website every day to see if we've made any changes to their issue. Some of these get very extensive. We have some that have comment histories that are 60, 70, 100 messages long because it takes a while to iterate through and resolve the problem. But sometimes it's just very short. And the beauty of this now is that we can search that too. So if somebody else comes to the site, the first thing they should do is type a little bit into the search box for all issues and see if if their problem's already been resolved. And so we communicate that in our support information on our project, but that's how that works. And at a very high level, this really captures how this organization works, how it builds and releases their product, and how they track changes over time. That's the very highest level, but it also assists with all the day-to-day operations, actually helping write effective code. So you're not stepping on each other. You're not building something at the same time as somebody else. It'll tell you there's a conflict, or when you're implementing a new feature, people become aware of that instantly that are also in the development group as you've committed it up, and as you've committed your changes, and they pull your changes down into their local working copy. And then how to track that. And these three, that workspaces, code lines, and integration, I'll talk about here. A workspace is a reproducible development environment. So how do I work on the same stuff that Kevin works on? How do we keep all of those files in the same directories? Before this kind of a system was put in place, Kevin would have some files and some folders on his computer that he would email somebody back and forth, which would definitely be different than the files and folders that are on Glenn's computer, which would most likely be completely different from the file. So finding things and communicating about that project space was very difficult before. And now, with this, you have this repository online, so this thing exists on the internet. We can then, using tools like SmartSVN, for example, which is a free software that most of us use, or even just a simple command line string, you can check out a local copy to your computer that mirrors exactly all the file layout, the hierarchy of our project. So we've started to sort of standardize our workspace, and now we can talk about things in the same information structure. And that also helps then with, if I want to build a script, or Glenn wants to make a script to automate some task within our project, things are still relative. Things are relative and will be the same on my machine as they are on Glenn's. So his bit of work to automate some routine that he has to do, that I may have to do, I can take that on the next checkout and use that exact same script and not have to figure out how to modify it to go to my directories that are different than Glenn's first. So having this ability to create this workspace and share that workspace is a huge advantage for increasing our productivity, at least in the communication aspect. So what is this revision process? It's really a very simple 4-step 4 steps that you iterate through over time. So the very first step is you download the current revision out of the repository to your local computer. It's called an update. The next thing you'll do then is you'll be modifying your local working copy, right? Making the changes you think need to be made. But you don't send that up yet because you don't know if anybody else has changed anything while you were working, and the odds are they have. So you do another update which merges the latest version of the repository into your working copy. So now you have the latest possible version of the code plus your changes all merged together, and then the last step, you just commit that up. So now when the next member in the group does this same cycle, they'll get your version that has just been changed, and the cycle just repeats.
You could potentially have to deal with some
Yeah.
conflicting things if you both happen to be working on the same space or something.
Yeah,
like that.
almost always in the updates, you're merging information, and in that, if you're not affecting the same lines, usually there's not a problem. You're working, but if you are, you're also very quickly alerted that the change you were just doing is the exact same code or thing that this other guy was doing, and you need to talk now and work out that problem. So it lets you be alerted to these conflicts much earlier than maybe waiting a month or 2 months and editing the same code and then emailing. And now how do we integrate all of these differences together?
How are decisions made and conflicts resolved? Just by
Through communication, sure. And in some, if it's just a quick phone call or an email, or maybe even put a note up in the issue tracker and say, I've conflicted, or you could discuss it on the discussion group if it's sort of a higher level thing. But usually I think most conflicts are, you shout down the hall or pick up the phone and, hey, I noticed we changed line 78. I'm trying to do this. What do you? Okay, let's do that. And then
So it's very
say-
clear what are in conflict, so it may be that you can resolve it yourself, by making changes yourself.
right, you may be able to see the intent of their change and just integrate that intent into whatever you're trying to do, if there's questions. So this is just the last sort of bit of detail here that I want to go through and sort of create now. We had that simple iterative process, but here's sort of what happens at the higher level, okay? So, and in this case, I'm using this example just so you see that you're not always stuck in the same main line, the same main code line. You can branch off, and in this case, this particular branch is, we're going to use it as a task branch. And what we're branching off here for is Randy needs to start working on FDS6. He's got some big architectural changes, big fundamental changes to the framework that he needs to make that would definitely break the code that we're trying to maintain and release for however long it'll take for Randy to get done with FDS6. Okay, so this gives you an opportunity to work in parallel, and you'll see how this process will allow you to keep to capture the value of the maintenance process, any bug fixes that are relevant to your new version, keep you parallel there, and at the same time let you stay independent of that. And so when it comes time that you've gotten to your end goal and you merge down, you've gotten all of the good work that's been done in the main line integrated into your code, and now you can contribute back on the big change that you were working on. So let's start in the trunk here. So we've got development happening on the trunk. I'm a new developer. I do a checkout, which I showed earlier with either one of the tools or the command line, and I pull down my local workspace. Now I create a local working copy on my computer that I'm going to do my development effort in. Okay. Periodically, I'll update. I want to do this fairly regularly because you don't want to diverge too much from what's happening in the code, or integration becomes more difficult later. So anytime you're not working right in the trunk, there's some amount of integration that will have to be handled at some point in the future. And the longer you wait and the more you diverge, the worse that's going to be, the more time. It's almost like exponentially worse to have to integrate even more and more code. So the more often you keep yourself up to date, merging in the bits of changes, the better. And then you do a private build on your machine before make sure everything's working, and then you commit that back up into the repository. You want the time between your update and commit to be as short as possible, because you don't want a big gap where you can overwrite somebody else's changes. In fact, if most tools, if there is a newer version since the last time you updated, it will make you update before you can commit. So the tool enforces, in a way, good behavior, but that's the general practice. And then at some point, so along this line, we have, you can imagine just all these discrete revision numbers. And at one particular revision number, in this case 1337, we decide this is a maintenance release, it's been tested and it's ready to go out to the public. And we tag that revision as with a label called FDS 5.6.8. Okay, so that's our maintenance release of FDS at that revision. Now, then we just proceed again. We start working, we're fixing bugs, we're moving forward, we're adding features. At the same time, Randy's pulling these changes over, since he checked it out, up into his into his branch, and he's bringing himself back in line with any new changes. So this is an update to the branch. You can imagine from this branch that that's actually where Randy's working in his developer workspace. He's pulling and updating the branch, not the trunk. Okay, so he's not in the main line. So now these two are developing in parallel. We're still doing our updates, builds, and commits while the other branch is working. And then Randy has met his end goal. So he's got what the framework integrated that he wants to make the changes. He's been updating along the way, so he's got all the bug fixes he needs. And then when he's ready, he merges down. This would be a major event. Like, this wouldn't just be like one day Randy merged all of his stuff in and now we have FDS 6. I mean, this would take some communication and some timing and planning, but at some point he could just very easily with a single command sort of push over and overwrite what's in the repository, all the changes that need to be made. So now the trunk is significantly altered by that task branch, and the task branch is ended. We don't need that anymore. We have a history of all the effort, but it doesn't have to continue any longer, and we just continue on the main line here, future development, and at some point we decide at revision 2, 3, 4, 5 that is FDS 6.0.0, and we release that package.
So maybe this is obvious to people, but it might be worth explaining major revision, minor revision, maintenance.
Okay, yeah, that's good. So there's all kinds of conventions that people use for numbering their software. In our case, the first digit is the major number. So 4 to 5 was a big change. It significantly altered the way people used the software. It changed how the input files needed to be written. It added new physics models and features. It altered it. So if somebody couldn't accept that level of change, they could stay at a previous version for some amount of time, but they knew that to update to 5 was a big step. 6 is a minor release. So when that digit increments, it's not as huge. Obviously, it's not as huge as the major release. Your input file should work, but maybe there's some new features or a significant bug fix that will change. That changes the code enough that maybe you'll get a little bit different answer on the solution because the algorithm has changed slightly, or there's maybe a different algorithm working under the surface that still comes with the same, maybe comes to the same number, but it is fundamentally different enough that you should be aware of that level of change. And then 8, these are our bug fixes. It won't really affect your use of the model at that level, but it resolves some issue or some issues that are minor that people are stumbling over, that the model itself will still operate the same once that bug fix is over. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll add a comment here. It's fairly straightforward, and most software developers do this sort of thing. For us, we weren't doing this up until a couple of years ago, and as we start working with regulatory agencies like NRC and DOE, they require this, because if someone is going to use our software for some application, they need to know if the project goes for 6 months, they probably have to stay certainly within the major version, and oftentimes they'll stay within the minor version. So they'll stay within 5.3 point whatever. We often get this question from DOE or NRC contractors, how do I know you haven't changed things? Well, look at that number.
And we outline this more clearly about what do these mean in our user guide, so you can actually.
And the other thing that this whole process allows you to do, it allows people like DOE to have confidence that the model's still going to work.
Yeah.
Right.
And so if we can demonstrate we go through a well-defined, well-reviewed process to update the model, then they don't have to be quite as specific on what version of the model they require their people to use.
Right.
What is the time scale for these kinds of things?
So in length of time, this right here, well, 1,000 revisions would be fairly significant, but this process itself, this update commit process, happens daily. Multiple people doing this daily.
No, I meant when you go through revision to revision, what's been so
Oh, so basically, major releases are about a year. Minor releases are 3 months-ish.
What'd you say?
And
I mean, 5 happened.
Several years on a major.
I would say several
several,
years.
you think? And then minors annually?
FDS 1 was 2000, so
Well, yeah, but I'm saying now in our, sort of in this,
In the
at
new
this
system.
speed, 5 to 6 has been 2 years, year and a half.
Well, 6 is maybe a year away.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
a couple of years.
yeah. So minor releases then probably 6 months.
Yeah.
3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
And then maintenance releases can be daily or weekly, so
Or hourly.
or hourly. In fact, some days we release 5.2.0 and come out with 5.2.1 within minutes. So
Yeah, we've had situations where someone downloads the latest version, finds a bug right off the bat, for which there is no workaround. We fix the bug and release 5.6.9 the next day.
yeah.
How often are you running simulations to confirm that your updates are working and confirm that they made an improvement?
Yeah, so normally for like a maintenance release, it's just going to be, we have a validation verification suite where we have 50, 60 cases and that test various things, and we compare against both experimental data, analytical solutions, and so we have this sort of comprehensive suite. That usually, that whole suite is run on major and minor changes. The maintenance releases, typically there should be a verification case that tests the fix, and that case is run to ensure that that bug was resolved, because the changes aren't so comprehensive that it could change the whole model. I think typically it's up to the developer to figure out what functionality needs to be tested. They know what they did in the code, and they alter it. So maintenance releases, not the huge comprehensive run, but definitely minor and major. We do the full suite and compare against past results and make sure we're getting consistent answers and things like that.
The validation suite consists of about 150
Is it yeah, okay, so it's grown.
experiments that we're comparing against. Those are run at the 5.6 level. So if we go from 5.6 to 5.7, we'll run that entire set of validation. Validation is where we compare against experiment. Those are lengthy calculations. When we do a maintenance, we have these simple little test cases, some which run in seconds, just to make sure that we haven't, in fixing things, we haven't broken others.
So that's it. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. How that process works, and so. And if you keep in mind that in that line are all of the project docs, it's website, it's web page updates, it's wiki page updates, documentation, source code, data sets for validation, verification cases, all of that's evolving over time by different people. The complexity of that information is not really displayed by those lines, but the process itself is relatively simple. So these are just a few. These are just 5 sort of steps of how you would want to participate in this project or in a project similar to this. So the first thing in our case would be get in the discussion group in the issue tracker and see what's going on. Like become familiar with what's happening in the project, and maybe do some very targeted searches on your area of interest to see what has been discussed and kind of get up to speed on the history of the project. The next step then would be, of course, to check out your latest copy, make those changes, start your development work, and these are for people who are participating who are not members of the project. And so, members of the project have commit rights to the repository; they can affect that space. Non-commit rights, you can work on your local copy, you can make your changes, and you can update from the repository. You just can't push anything back until either you're granted access or you submit a patch that somebody else then merges in for you. So, and we'll get to that. Yeah?
Brian, do you ever have any problems with people people modifying their local copies and winding up sort of an incompatible version with the official versions?
I'm not sure.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what exactly what file format, but or what.
Well, we encourage students to work who want to work with the source code to do so, and oftentimes they'll make changes. And what we ask that they do is, if they're to publish or present their work with their version, we say, we took a version 5.2.6 and we modified it in this way, and here are the results. And that's one way that students would communicate to us what they've done.
Right. So, and that's this next step then is to test your local changes and prove their value to communicate back. So we sort of work on more of a merit-based system in the project where you have to take your idea, make your changes, prove that it works to be given, to get that to merge back into the code. We just don't make oh, you want to join the team? Okay, let's just start working and see what happens. There's definitely the tools and resources available for you to work offline, diverge slightly, make your modifications, build your test cases to prove your value, and then there's a mechanism.
Like how to participate as a developer. I mean,
as a developer that's
as a user,
not in the member, right?
I mean,
This is a developer participation. Yeah, absolutely.
How much contribution have you gotten from people without commit authority?
In the last year or so, we've seen a lot more. It took some time for people to really sort of get it and start working in this space, but we've had some people now from other countries. We have some colleagues in Germany who have taken the source code, just hobbying and testing and making modifications and showing that they've come up with some advantage, and then emailing those changes to us that we can then integrate. So we're starting to see it happen more and more. We haven't added anybody new into them as a long-term developer because once you've proven your value, then you should be prepared to, if you're a member, to maintain it. And I think that's a fairly large disconnect with what's happened in the past, that most codes or most models have been developed and then just like, I did it, the paper's done, the docs are done, here's the software, enjoy. And then they go on to a new project and that thing sort of dies and rots on. And one of the biggest efforts I think that we put in is this effort to maintain and build and keep contributing and growing the software, and not just saying we met our stated objective on our mission statement and we're done with the project and we move on.
Yeah, but I'll add, there is a problem with this system in traditional academic circles. And as we haven't gotten as much participation as we'd like from people, we go to meetings, we see many talks given about our model. So students are downloading it and they're modifying it. Trouble is, your typical graduate student is working on a 2 or 3 year cycle. Okay? So they do work, it takes them about a year to come up to speed. They do work for a year, then they get ready for graduation and publishing their thesis and so forth, maybe attend a conference or two. So we often don't see these changes or suggested new ideas for several years. In that time, as Brian was showing with the trunk, the trunk has gotten so far beyond what that student started with that the merging is almost impossible. And in fact, in a lot of times, the student and the professor, once they've published their results in some form or fashion, and the student has graduated, that's it. They're not particularly interested in going to the next step, which is where we'd like them to go, and that is communicate to us what change you made and why you think the change is better than what we have. I mean, we're not
where we are currently.
We're currently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they've kept up to date over time using these tools, and so when they offer up this suggestion, it's much easier to integrate into where we are today than it would be.
Assuming that they have kept up to date.
Right.
Well,
So
a lot of professors, they complain to me offline, I want to work with you guys, but you keep changing things. Well, of course we keep changing things. I mean, we change things every day. And this system is beautifully designed so that student can work on a particular algorithm, but at the same time keep getting those daily updates. And those daily updates are not going to affect that particular algorithm that the students work on. It's just going to be superficial stuff that we're fixing.
And if it does, they'll know it that
Yeah.
day, not 2 years later when we've completely rewritten the whole core solver for some aspect of the code, and they went off on a complete different tangent in that meantime.
Right, but as a lead into the next segment, I mean, Brian's going to talk more about the social media tools. These new ways of communicating and doing things have been embraced by large numbers of people, but I think that the academic community is having the hardest time adopting these new techniques because some of them are very, very different ways of working than traditional academics works. I mean, the 2 and 3 year graduate schools cycle, the yearly or bi-yearly meetings, the archival journal publications, those things are happening on the time frames of years. We're working daily.
And one last note before I move into the next section is that I showed an example here with using Google Code Project Hosting, what we use. But there are other very similar tools that meet different needs. So for example, Microsoft has released their Office Live platform that lets you collaborate on Microsoft Office documents in a very similar fashion. You check out the file or save it locally, you work on it for a bit, you save back the new revision, and the other people collaborating on that document can also work on that same document in that space over time and not have to work on 7 different Word documents, emailing to some poor guy who's cutting and pasting and messing with formatting and trying to get everything to fit into one Word document at the end of the day. So there are other tools similar to this for different application spaces, different purposes, but the same kind of process takes place in those spaces. So this is sort of moving into the next area. So, like, what is social media? We had the Social Media Day here at NIST not too long ago, which was in somewhat response to Obama's transition team coming to NIST and asking, well, what are you guys doing in this area? And they said, not much, let's have a social media day. So, so that was like, let's talk about social media. And so while we had been doing this stuff for a while, it starts to become now, there's a lot of activity in this space now. So it's very timely. We kind of could sort of come out into the light a little bit safely and poke our heads out and look around and see what's going on. So,
that statement is very significant because we were all very nervous that NIST was going to be very upset at us for doing this somewhere other than NIST.
Yeah, that culture I think is an important aspect to being able to adopt these tools in our workflow here in NIST in all different divisions. But so here's this gigantic blast of all kinds of logos from these social media sites, and although they all have different colors and images and funny names and things like Zazzle and Streamload or whatever, the core concept of all of these apps is the same thing. It's just content created, shared, discussed, reused by people on the internet, right? So the key to this, though, is that in most of our use of the web in the past has been broadcast-based. So you create content, you share it, and then that's about where it stops. It doesn't really evolve past that. There's no direct feedback loop within that content to capture comments or discussions, and you can't. Somebody else can't really take that information, reuse it, and push it back in to add value to that content. Right? So things like wikis, blogs, YouTube videos. There's now these mashups. With content, different kinds of content being pushed together. These new services allow that stuff. So the first step, though, you have this big blast, and that was only a tiny sampling of all these different products out there on the internet right now, is come up with some sort of strategy. So like our first goal, what did we want to do is we want to just make sure that we were very efficiently as possible, delivering current relevant information to the intended audience. And that's like a very general statement, but it has to be general because we have a lot of different content that changes on different timelines that's relevant to different people in different audiences, right? So how do we set up our tools to address these different channels of information going to different people who have different needs, different use cases? For a short example, we have new users, which have completely different needs than existing users. We have developers who, researchers, engineers, students, these few people you can see have very different interests, but they all have interest in FDS, but in different ways, and will need different information from our services than what a website can broadcast to all of them at the same time. So, and in terms of content, we have different items there. User support information, documentation, bug reports, research plans, project activity on a daily basis, software updates when those happen. So we have also more information that changes on different timescales and different people will be interested in. And we have a selection of tools that we've used. Some have become more popular than others, and that's just part of the strategy, sort of optimizing what we use to talk to people in different channels. But we have websites, a mailing list, our discussion group, our issue tracker, our groups pages. We'll go through some of these. Rss feeds, a blog, screencasts when needed, Twitter, and an IRC channel. So there's...
What's IRC?
So that's Internet Chat Relay, or Relay Chat, and it's basically a real-time chat framework on a Freenode server that lets, if somebody has a question, they can just log into the server, jump into our channel, and ask a question, and like if I'm signed in, or if somebody else is signed in, they can respond right then to that.
So
it's a little bit like instant
like
messaging, but instead of more one-to-one, it can be a room of people talking. It's like a chat room.
A chat room.
Yeah. So we'll look at a few of these different things. Starting in the discussion group, I think I'm going to start here because this is really by far our most popular information tool. So we have so far 1,200 plus threads in less than 2 years. So these are separate individual topics contributed. We have about, when I took this screenshot, it was 748 users. There's a few adding each day, are members of the group. And you'll see a wide range of topics here. And this is designed for more high-level general discussions and some user support, right? If the user support gets too specific and becomes like a problem or an issue that needs to be resolved, we redirect them to the issue tracker and reference where it went in the discussion group. So this isn't really what we use to resolve and track and follow through on direct user support, but what this offers is the chance for the entire community to chime in on some topic that's important to the community that we aren't dictating is important to the community. So, which I think is a key. We can usually come up with ideas to talk to people about and present on, but really what do they need to know about? And in this case, this guy, Emmanuel, said, a GUI for FDS. What's the current state and developments in this area, right? This resulted in, we started in December 19th, goes into February now, end of January. There's 57 some threads here, or messages within this thread. And it's a very good example of this information flow. We have people from NIST, ATF, other developers, and a couple of keys here are Mitch from REI and Charlie Thornton. Mitch from REI was sort of this, we had this mystery GUI project happening under an SBIR, I believe, from the Air Force, a grant from the Air Force. They were going to develop a super GUI for FDS, very simple and easy to. We didn't know anything about it.
Explain what a GUI is.
Graphical user interface. So some really easy wrapper to make input files for FDS. Okay, and we knew about this activity, but we didn't know what they were doing, what their plans were, anything like that, which seemed a bit odd to us since we developed the thing that they're wrapping around. You think that they would want to talk to us and find out what we're doing, and if we're changing anything, it will completely break their interface. But so we didn't know about that. Whereas Charlie Thornton, he's a developer in a small company in Kansas, an engineering firm, who's developed a graphical interface for FDS called PyroSim, and he works for that company. And he chimes in, he monitors the forum, and he found this thread and chimed in and explained like what their software does and how this works, and then what kind of needs need to be addressed, and how there's, trying to get feedback also for the community and to share information on what they're doing So we get this wide range of information from all across the board, all around the world in over a period of a month. This kind of thing, there's a lot of these threads. So, I mean, right now out of 1,200 topics, we have over 6,000 threads. So there's quite a few messages per topic, and these are very active. Also on this group site, we have pages. This is one of the pages. These, any member of the community has the ability to create content on these pages. And in this case, we set up in the beginning just a template. Said, this is a training resource page, a little bit of information. Please use this template to add in your information on training resources around the world. I think now there's 25 of these that get updated. Here's SFPE, they're 2.5, this was back in October. Here's one up in Canada, this one's in Tokyo. So people can come to this space who have a training resource they want to offer to make people aware of, add to the list. They can actually broadcast that change to the group through the discussion group. So you'll see this page was changed, everybody will be aware of that, and people can go and monitor this update.
Let me just add a little bit to this discussion. I mean, one of the benefits of these tools is that there are things that we do well here at NIST, and there are things that we don't do so well at. FDS is just a Fortran code. It's a big number cruncher. It's command line driven. It's sort of old school software. Glenn Forney has written a nice visualization tool to look at the results of these calculations in a 3D visualization. But we never developed this so-called front end, the easy point-and-click interface that you would expect from most software. We just decided that we don't do that sort of thing very well. We don't have the manpower to do it. But now what we've seen through these tools is that the community will step up. If they see a need for something, someone will step up and fill that need. Another good example is the training. A number of people have written to us and said, gee whiz, this is great software, but how do we train our engineers how to use it? And again, it's not something that NIST does particularly well, at least our division. We don't have the manpower, we don't have the resources. And here it is, a need fulfilled. That's parallel to our efforts. So we continue to do what we do well. These people on the list, a lot of them are professors, teachers, professional societies. That's what they do well. It all works together very, very nicely.
And the last little bit that we have here is a place where people can just store files temporarily to reference to in their discussions or to share with one another in a shared space. For example, I'm running FDS and I'm using this particular command and I see this weird artifact in the display. Screenshot. Does anybody else see this? That's so much easier to communicate that way than trying to describe. Well, it's kind of this jaggedy edge with little fuzzy lines emanating sort of. I'm not really sure how to. Just a nice little screenshot. Sharing information, sharing input files. Here's my input file. I'm trying to do this thing. Do you guys see any problems with this? And people can discuss in this space these files and share with one another. And we have, as sort of a side note, we've had actually in the past somebody put up a PDF of a conference proceeding, said here's a document that would help people because it's really relevant, and we immediately said that's a copyrighted, that has copyrights associated with it. You don't have right to post it. Take it down, or we delete it, and it was gone. And so these things are monitored. People. I think that was actually somebody reported that it could be a possible copyright violation to us because we didn't look at the page that minute when it was posted, and so we get a lot of feedback. And another thing about this group, we changed our membership requirements after about 6 months or so, I think, and maybe a year, when we were attacked by a porn robot. So what the porn robot did was went to the pages, which I showed just a second ago, and changed each of these hyperlinks, not the text, but where it went to porn sites. So it was some little automated routine that went through the thing, edited our pages, and jumped out. And the way it was allowed in is we weren't checking to see if humans were signing up to our group. Right? We were just letting members, if you wanted to sign up, join, click the button, you're a member, contribute. And so by just putting in place, just slightly changing our membership invitation requirement, where when they want to join, all we ask them to do is just say something about their intent, their interest, just enough that we can tell you're human, right? And then, since then, no more problems. So, and maybe there will be another problem some days. Maybe some really hostile, aggressive person will go through the rigmarole of like sounding legitimate and getting into the group and then making changes. But we have controls. We'll just ban the account. We'll warn them, ban the account. We've come up with a policy statement now that very clearly outlines what we expect from users and what they can expect from us in return, things like that. So, but by being really open and just upfront about our place in our role in this, I think has created a culture that's just been really, really great. We have over 700 people now who are all cooperating and helping each other. And you know, we've the other small instance, we have what we call lurkers who just come to the group to find things to pick out and complain about or bring bring issues up in the community outside of the group. So these aren't people, not really trolls, because a troll participates in the group and causes problems. These are people who just take bits out and then makes problems outside of this information space based on the information they find here. Okay, so we've had that, and the allegation against our management team was that we were censoring posts. So if there was something critical about FDS, we must have been deleting them or not allowing them to be posted because there was a post to the group that nobody replied to. So therefore, we were censoring that topic. Well, it was the way we have the group set up is very easy to show that it's an unmoderated forum. So once you've proven you're human, any post goes directly to the forum without moderation and only is moderated after the fact. So we've removed ourselves from the approver of information role or the censor role, and we put the responsibility ultimately back on the user community to post appropriately, or we'll delete your stuff, warn you, and eventually ban you if you're acting out of sorts and definitely against our policy statement. But we were able to demonstrate that and clarify our policy document, put that online, so it's very easy now for people to see, and just communicate it again that we don't censor information, that it's an unmoderated forum, and just the way we have it set up just won't allow us to censor. As soon as something gets to the forum, it's emailed to everybody in the group instantly. So anybody that's just subscribed as a mail for mail delivery will instantly get any post to the group, and it's very easy to check we're not censoring. So that issue was snapped out fairly quickly. Okay, I've talked about the issue tracker, so I'm going to skip this because I want to leave a little bit more time at the end here to talk about things. But basically, we get these issues. Again, these things can be tracked and followed through with, and this is very targeted to a very specific. This template comes out when you want to start an issue. What application you're using, what SVN number, what compile date, what operating system. These fields are what are reported to the user on the command line when they just type our application command. So we can check if they test it, what they're doing and what they're using, and we know if they need to update or if there's a problem in a specific revision or whatever. And then they describe the problem they're having, and then we report it, solve it. And these things change state over time. Their status from accepted, new, open, accepted, in work. There's different statuses, and we can track that. Here we have a wiki. We have wiki pages. Wikis are just very small, sort of agile documents that exist online that can be modified by anybody in the membership, in the project member group in this case. So these are things that not everyone in the community can edit, but anybody in the development group can edit. And this was a real need because before, the only way to get something to our website was, for example, Simo in Finland would have to email me some information that I would then have to edit in HTML and update to the website, and that would take another 15 minutes. So there was this sort of delay in content. And was the website really the best place for this sort of transient or temporal information? That, in this case, how to use the MPitch2 graphical user interface that was contributed by Samara Nielsen of Victoria University. So she had this little instruction set that worked for her. She contributed it to us, and we were very quickly just able to edit, add this up, and get that information out to people. That really is not good website material, right? This will probably change on the next release of the MPitch2 graphical user interface, or when people aren't using MPitch2 anymore, they're using OpenMPI or LambMPI or whatever. So these are more like transient documents that we modify, and anybody can modify easily in our group. We don't currently have a wiki, but the Google pages that are in our group act as a wiki because they are by definition a web page that can be edited by anybody in the community very easily through the graphic interface. So, this last bit on this topic is how we share our project data. We have now Atom RSS feeds, which are syndicated feeds. They're basically just little XML files that have a little bit of information in them that link back to what they're reporting on. So it's just a small snippet of information. In this case, we have project information, project updates, download activity, wiki activity, issue changes, new issues, source code changes, and a code search gadget. Where you see gadgets after these, Google's made little tools that can be embedded in your Google homepage. So if you use like iGoogle or you have a customized Google page, you get these little monitoring windows that you don't have to check your email or whatever. You just open your homepage and it'll tell you what's new. You can see that. I'll show you that in a minute. But if you have a feed reader, the Atom links work for that. And even the issues, there's a CSV file that you can use to export your issue history. So you can sort of download your history of issues.
Are we going to be slaves to Google next?
No, I'm just waiting for somebody to come up with something better. There's other, there's SourceForge. When we tried that originally, actually, SourceForge was our first attempt at creating this sort of using some kind of software configuration management system. And at the time, it was just so riddled with multiple click-throughs and a lot of advertising that it became so distracting for users to try to just figure out, what do I click to get a download? That when we saw the Google Code site with just a big downloads tab that you click, and then there's these big blue underlined links, and you click that, and it starts downloading to your computer, that we definitely quickly sort of migrated away. But if there's a better tool that's more clear and more comprehensive, we're not tied to this system.
It might be worth mentioning that everything that Brian has described here, all these different services and tools, a lot of them are Google, but then there are other things as well. It's all free. The sites that we're using, the software that we're using, all free. So it does make it easy for us. If we had to jump ship with Google, if Google, for whatever reason, went out of business tomorrow, we could jump ship very, very quickly and recover the whole project in some other form. The checkout system, SVN, is not necessarily a Google thing. It's a well-known way of
I have it installed on my
version.
workstation here. So I have it installed on my computer here that I do local stuff with on my own machine.
Right.
You maintain backups of all the information that you got on Google servers.
Yeah, so by, especially in our Google Code project, because that's very important, there's a tool called SVN Sync that lets us take our whole project history onto another repository on a local, like a full local copy that we can keep up to date. So it's like a full backup of the whole history of the project. So yeah, there are tools to enable that.
And some of the members, for whatever reason, have actually done this as well.
Yeah, they do it for fun.
He's a real computer enthusiast, and he decided just to have his own, not only his local copy of the repository, but his own local copy of the entire project history.
Yeah.
And everybody has on their computer the latest copy of the repository. It's just that you wouldn't have on your computer the entire project history, but you'll at least have the imprint of everything that is currently active.
So in here, these two tools, I throw these on at the end because they're relatively new and they haven't really been used to their full extent. The blog, this has just basically been me making small updates about project activity. There's a shifting intent here where what we would hope to turn this into is a kind of an online journal for experts in the community to talk about things related to FDS and Smokeview. And we would invite people who have an interest in writing things relevant to this community to make small articles. We would probably do some kind of rotating assignment, like you'd be on for 3 months, write a couple articles, and then we'll bring in the next person as authors, and really create a more relevant sort of news or information space than we have in any other format. We don't really have like, what's Kevin's thoughts today on CFD or whatever, and where are we moving in the project? What's FDS of tomorrow? And let's create a conversation about that. We could kind of do it in the discussion group, but it sort of gets lost in the chatter. It's a lot, it'll filter down through the threads, and only on a search would you find it. Whereas here it's archived, there's archives over time, and you can go back and read sort of the thoughts of these different people over time. So there's some thought on how to do better with the blog, and this is very, very new as a test to see first how many people actually out there in our FDS community are into Twitter and like would care if this was on here. And this is more of like a microblog. So this could be called a microblog. So it's just 140 some characters long is the max length. Just maybe a link, a little bit of information, just something to keep you aware of what's happening. And a nice term I heard for this was sort of, I'm going to forget. Dang, it was such a good thing too. It's like ambient. It's like an ambient environment for this information. So you don't have to. You're sort of surrounded by just little reminders of the activity of a space without having to dig fully into a website, get involved in the discussion group, find out what's on the blog. It takes just little bits of your time to see the little bit of an update and see if it's something you want to pursue or not. So these would be very just small updates. It's sort of a new experiment. And then here I did a screencast. So I was asked over and over by a few different users, how do I set up FDS and Smokeview on the Mac? Like what do I do? Because it's not an installer like you get for the Windows platform. It's not set up like that. It's just an archive. So what's the best way to do it? So I sat down, kind of said hello, what I'll do. I look very somber and professional. I think here it's terrible with my mist shirt. But that goes away, and then I get down to business, and I just start clicking around. I'm showing, okay, you go to this link, you click here, you download this file, after I posted that, I've received multiple compliments just saying like, that helped. That was so great. That took 5 minutes for me to just watch the video, follow along, and I have it all set up. Oh, and by the way, the tip you gave me on how to use the little screen command to create sort of a virtual shell that I can run my cases in, I didn't even know that was there. I didn't know that was built in. That's really great. Thanks for the tip, and I use that all the time now. So by showing just a quick video of what you're doing and how it works, you can communicate a lot more than you can try to document down in some user's guide in the how to set up FDS section. It's usually much easier to follow. And you can always just pause, follow along, just do the same thing on the screen. So
a number of these types of things you'll see on YouTube.
Yeah.
There was a person in Canada who decided to make a few of these for FDS and put them up on YouTube.
Yeah, so and here it is. So we started putting up all this content. People are taking that, they're reusing it, and they're creating new content. So this is the guy. This is his website that you're talking about. How to install FDS, how to run a model, viewing results, introduction to Smokeview. He's got a few of our example cases that he's done videos of, and he's showing things around, he's talking about things. So he's creating new information that people find useful and putting this stuff up on YouTube. And he's getting quite a few hits. Like if you go to some of these videos on YouTube, it's got like a decent number of views. And so it's exciting to see that things, maybe seed information we put out, like in a user's guide that wasn't very clear. Somebody goes, I'll just make a video of that, and now we have videos on YouTube. So well, what's interesting is I didn't know this site existed until I was doing some searches for FDS. One thing we'd really like to try to encourage is a little bit more feedback from all these people doing all this great stuff. Like we're not, it's this REI somewhere doing some GUI for FDS. We don't know anything about what they're doing or what their intent is, and if we can help them, or if what our work will do will hinder them, or anything. So we want that feedback a little bit.
Well, I think part of the problem is that a number of these people, obviously this person is a consultant, he wants to make money, so he's setting up this site to demonstrate his proficiency in using the software. And maybe he feels a little bit shy about contacting us, thinking that we'll see him as a competitor, even though we see this as a good thing. I mean, we're not in this to make money. We're in this to get this technology out there. We're the Department of Commerce. We're not the Department to impede commerce. So the fact that there are these consultants using the software and making money is a good thing. All we want to do is get them to just communicate with us. And he can even advertise his little site on our third-party page and say, there is a guy who's offering free training and use of the software. That saves us from having to do it ourselves.
Here's an example where there's a site in Germany where they've been taking posts to the discussion group, blog posts, maybe some email traffic, and then writing it, converting all of our information into German, so that translating it so that they can talk to the German community. And what's really fascinating about this is because some of our files are like document files and things are available in our project space. They were able to take those, like maybe a source LaTeX document, and they can then just translate the content and reissue that as the German version of the FDS User's Guide. So they've put in all the effort to completely translate the User's Guide into German. And we don't do, who will do that here? We won't, but and if you look at our web traffic and our user traffic, we have a significant portion from Germany. So having these resources available that we didn't have to spend time and create has been a huge help to this very significant user base. Yeah, we got English. We got our English users covered, I think, with all the English content on our website. So here's an example of what I talked about the gadgets. So we have these little feeds and streams coming off our site that can be manifested into little bits of information that exist. I put all these things on one page, but maybe this little, like the downloads link, will be embedded with your daily news and whatever else on your homepage, and so you can see if there's activity, if that's something you want to follow. An issue update, tracker, changes to the repository, things like that. And then, if you want to watch the daily summary on the website, that's also there. Here was kind of an interesting thing that we stumbled across, which is there's a site called Olo, which goes out and searches through SourceForge, Google Code. There's a couple other like online open source development environments, very similar to Google Code project hosting. They go and they read through the repository, and then they pull up statistics, and they get like who's committing what kind of languages are they committing, how many lines of code would that be, how many man hours would that take at so much per hour, and they're doing a lot of like kind of statistical analysis of our activity that we're doing, which within our project. And I really like our analysis summary, mostly written in Fortran, large active development team. Okay, that's awesome. So we got a really good compliment from some robot somewhere on the website.
Who's that one user review?
That was me. I was like, I use this. Okay. But what's interesting is this little snippet we could put it on our website, and then every time somebody clicks it, it will track it in this space if we want. It's just kind of an interesting deal. We're creating information, and then this information is just being sort of absorbed and reused and put in somewhere else. And who knows how many people check this site? I mean, and these are there's some very large, like the Apache Foundation, some of these big development sites, MySQL. They do a lot of their sort of information presentation in this interface, in this particular website. So it's nice to see that we're there, that they found us and they've pulled us up into this space.
And I think the key to all this is if you get the information out there in a form that people can use, you'd be amazed.
Don't jump ahead, Kevin.
Really?
Yeah.
All right, come on, man.
So,
you'll be amazed at what you'll see. I mean, we didn't even anticipate a lot of this.
No, it's really great. And this is just a little bit of information about usage. So we have some basic tracking kind of knowledge to know generally where the activity is coming from. And we know that over the last year, in 2008, we had almost 100,000 visits to the website. It was 99-some thousand to just our site. This could be some amount of robots and things like that, but as you distill down through the levels of activity, it actually sort of makes sense. I think it's fairly close. From the United States, of the 99,000, it was 22,000 unique visitors to our site. And with the biggest numbers coming from California and Maryland. So I wonder why that is. But with about 2,500 coming from a particular state. That's sort of the max per state visitors. And so, 99,000 visits, 149 countries and territories, 22,000 just from the United States. And in that same amount of time, 1,232 discussion threads, 6,231 messages within those threads, 748 members in less than 2 years. So in a very short amount of time, we've seen a fairly significant growth rate. As we continue, and even just I compared October to the end of the year between last year and this year, and it's like a 30% increase just in 1 year over the same kind of block of time. So I think as we continue to present this kind of information out, we get that information out there, people become more aware of it, the discussion starts, the word of mouth spreads, or maybe there's good articles written in journals about what's happening on this. We'll just see that just continue to rise. So I thought of just sort of what have been the keys to our success here, and I think our very first one is a willingness to cooperate. We knew we had to cooperate. We had too many people not within NIST that needed to work together to get this thing done, and so that attitude of cooperation was like the foundation, and then the desire to share that information that we're cooperating on. So those two kind of fundamentals, I think, led to a big growth rate. And our communication strategy then helped. You can pick 100 different tools. Like maybe Twitter is not going to work for us. It's a small test. Maybe we just stick to the discussion group and the issue tracker because that's what works. Maybe there's some other technology we haven't exploited yet. But by looking at the needs and coming up with strategies to sort of meet those needs, you'll increase your success. Not just picking it because you've heard wikis are cool and like people should have wikis or something like that. So I think these last bits are very key. The supporting technologies. It would be great if all of this stuff was as well run at NIST and supported at NIST as we get from Google Code, but we don't have those supporting technologies in place at NIST. So we had to go outside to find the technology to deliver the services that we need. As I see kind of participating now in sort of the Web 2.0 space and the groups here, that there is some change to the culture, that people are really starting to adopt these things and really wanting to create these tools. Maybe it's not best to be done at NIST, but I think that trend to have these technologies be available and accessible, and that policies are being written so that these can be allowed to be used. That's a huge bit. And what Kevin was saying, these open information formats are just critical. Like plain text files or easily machine read or human readable files are the key. If you take a paper you've written and you scan it to PDF and then you put a scanned version of your document on the web, you've pretty much ruined the information content in that file. It's not only very difficult to get at, but who knows what, PDF is a somewhat open standard, but you can't search the document, so you want to make sure that the document is free, the information is free to be accessed and reused as easy as possible. We could very easily store all of our data sets in XLS files, but we've chosen CSV because everything can read CSV, and only Excel can, most of the time, depending on the version, read an XLS file. So we try to keep those standards, keep open standard, open format file formats to share this information. And the last bit here is that just sort of these highlights. So now our information is very much easier to access. Our day-to-day work on the project is open now for both developer and public review. So every change we make has a lot of eyeballs on what we're doing, and that helps us fail more quickly. And I think that that's a key. We want to fail fast, and we want to know when we made a mistake sooner than later, resolve it so it doesn't perpetuate into the future. And that now any limitations, we're very open and transparent about limitations in our model. People can say, we get all these all the time, I have doubt about this sprinkler routine. Will it do, and then actually no, it won't do that, or yes, it will, or only in these limited cases, or we don't really have any good data on that. So we're very open with that. And because our code is used for life safety issues, people need to know the limitations clearly. It shouldn't be a black box that we just put some magic incantation in a text file and it comes up with the right answer. we want to make sure we're communicating as quickly as and efficiently as possible with the limitations. That our developers now are working with community to help people solve problems. It's not just Kevin getting 1,500 emails a year or 3,000 emails a year to his inbox and hopefully being able to file through it. We've got the whole developer community now has access to these issues that they can help resolve, and the user community we see all the time chiming in to help each other out. And so our support team went from like Kevin via email and Glenn to 8 to now potentially hundreds or eventually maybe thousands of people who can help out. And we've been able to capture better this parallel distribution of effort, that we don't have these same old bottlenecks of, Kevin, I need the latest version of source code. Can you zip it and email me? And then I'll get the zip and I expand that and I do some edits and then I'll zip it back up and email it back to Kevin and he has to cut and paste that into his latest copy, and it was just horrible like development bottleneck. And at the same time, probably the best support information resource in the world prior to this was Kevin McGrattan's inbox in his email client. That was the repository of knowledge that all these people were asking. And then we had a little bit, we'd pull something out every once in a while in a FAQ maybe or something like that, but the day-to-day questions that people have now, we have not hidden behind an email application or something like that. It's all available. So now we don't have time to discuss. But we kind of did along the way, so that was great. But I do, if there's any questions or anything like that, I'd be happy to answer. So,
I'll make a comment just following up on your last statement.
okay.
That social media day, someone made a comment, I forget, I think it was one of the panelists. They said one of the biggest problems in implementing the so-called Web 2.0 is email. Email is actually becoming a problem in the sense that we all use it, we all love it, and we all depend on it. So for me, it's especially true. If something doesn't show up in my email box, I don't act on it. I'm not like Brian, who surfs the web and goes to all these different sites and he's got all these links and feeds and whatever else. I mean, I look first and foremost at my email, and what we found is that I'm not alone. A lot of people are like this. So we're actually exploiting the fact that people are addicted to email to give them the prompts that send them to these various sites. Because you cannot expect people to come in the morning and go to 6 different places and try to get information. So as much as possible, if you can get in one place these notices, hey, the FDS team just acted on your bug request. Click here and you'll see what they did.
Yeah, I get the distilled once a day version of everything. I come in and I have one email that says there were, 5 new topics and 10 authors on, and here were the topics and a little summary of each one of them.
Yeah, and I think that's the key is like there's so much information that people are going to want to access that and process it in completely different ways. But so before with only the mailing list, we only allowed people to get every email when it was sent, and it wasn't sent that often, so it wasn't too bad. But that was also a problem. There weren't a lot of updates, so people really didn't know what was going on. So you can kind of engage yourself in that as deeply or as superficially as you want, and then follow links further if you need to. I think that's kind of this like a good idea for like the Twitter thing. It's like it's just such short. It enforces such a short blip of data that and it's relatively easy to just keep a little stream of like whoever you're following on Twitter. If you're interested in what's happening with either the fds-smv tag or discussions to the SMV channel, it just pops up on your deal. So yeah. So anyway, anybody else?
One complaint that I have is that I refuse to remember URLs.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, like each one of those things has a different URL. So if you don't have either a very well organized website, host website that gets you where you need to go, which was down, by the way, for most of the week or something.
Yeah, 2.5 days.
Or this stuff doesn't come up on a quick search, that
Yeah.
gets you all these different things. And in my mind, it becomes completely useless. Even every time I get told, oh, that's on a wiki or whatever. What's the wiki? What's the discussion group website?
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things I've run
I
into.
can't link to it or something like that. Then
Yeah.
it doesn't exist.
One of the things I've ran into, I mean, we had to kind of fall back on hiding it all on our homepage under plain text links because exactly what you were saying. Like we couldn't list for the discussion group. Go to groups.google.com/group/p/ whatever, right? So we had to hide it. What would be nice is if we could get, and I've asked a couple times, but I haven't really got a good response, is that it would be great if we could map NIST.gov like URLs to very simple URLs, like subdomain URLs, to external resources. Even if it goes through a temp page that says you're going off of a NIST site, but some way for us to make very nice URLs. The other option is just hide it like we do, and that's the only thing we can do. And I did do fds-smv. I switched to that. Originally, we were kind of separate as FDS and Smokeview. I wanted to create kind of a unique text string that could be easily searched and make people familiar with fds-smv as like our project. And now if you search that,
That's what I
it's
do.
very
I go
relevant.
and I do SMV
but if you-
FDS-SMV and
Yeah.
we're the first thing that comes up.
And in the
that's
past,
when
if you
that's
search
down, then I
FDS,
don't know where to go for the wiki or,
Yeah.
or the project.
and if
Just get there the first
And
time
then-
and make a bookmark.
Right, but I don't do bookmarks. Because if I bookmark every single thing like that, then I would have a bookmark list that's useless because then I can't find it in the bookmark.
Yeah.
It's just easy if it shows up.
And
do Google search, and then in addition to our pages, you come across all these other funny
This
ones.
is exactly the point. Like everybody's got their own little pet way of doing it. It should
Okay.
just happen.
well,
Like the pages that are nice, the good, nice websites,
Yeah.
all this information, it comes to you. You don't have to
well, when it's online,
figure out a way to get to it.
yeah, when it's online. I mean, most of the content is all linked from the homepage. Our bounce rate is super high, which is great. I basically want nobody to spend time on our website. So if they hit a page, see the link they need, and get out, I consider that success because most of our good resources are not on our website, right? So I want bouncing, a lot of bouncing, and so our goal, that goal is being met, and our time on site is very low. People are usually there around 2 minutes at max. So that I think that's success because our website isn't the information space that our other services are. We don't have it all integrated. If we had a forum in our site and some kind of an SVN system and a tracker and everything built in, that'd be different. But we do have this bouncing thing. But I was going to say I wanted to get away from just FDS and Smokeview originally because if you search FDS, it's a product. It's like a feminine spray or something like that. And that was what was coming up first. And it was like, okay, we don't want the top 3 links to be not relevant to people trying to find our software. So I think kind of a little bit of branding with that, just that simple like FDS-SMV has been beneficial. Most of the traffic to the site comes from an FDS-SMV search, a Google search of that. So that's over time that's sort of taken hold in people's minds that that's what they look for. So plus it's easier than Fire Dynamic Simulator or Smokeview and who knows what they find. So. Okay. Anybody else? Oh, great. Well, thanks everybody for coming out.